By request, today's all about chopping up drum breaks in the MPC Live. Thank you, Mr. George Guntrip, for the video idea. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you know how to use the sampler, so we're going to start from this point with the break already loaded up in the MPC Live. And there are a bunch of ways you can go about chopping. And if you want to just isolate a kick drum, for example, you can. And then from there, you would just go process and extract, and that'll create a new sample just from that region that you had highlighted. So there's my kick. But going back, and a real quick way to do this, click on trim until it says chop. We can easily put markers on every one of these transient points by pressing threshold. Well, we'll hit shift and then convert. Let's do it. I'll go out to main screen. And now I have a program created with all my drums sliced up. I think this really is your simplest, most quickest way of chopping up a drum break, getting some one-shots out of it. So now if I go into program edit, this is what it looks like. It's still actually a whole, it's just one loop still. But each one of the pads has its start and end points set just to have individual notes. So I showed you the quickest way to get some one-shots out of a drum break loop. Now I'll show you my way. I would start with an empty program. I would start with these three, and I'm going to go ahead and hit all so I can make changes, or excuse me, hit multiple so I can make changes on these three pads. And I'm going to put the sample on there, put it back to current. Okay, so right now I have the drum break on three pads. I'm going to set each one of these, excuse me, they're not set to cut each other off because I'm trying to just make some one-shots here, but I set them to pad, which also stands for pad parameters. And I'm going to go ahead and isolate on the first pad, pad 1, where I would set my kick drum. I'm going to just hit my, go ahead and set my start on my end point so that I just have a kick there. Alright. So pad 2, I'm going to change the start point so I have a snare, and change my end point. On pad 3, I'm going to do my hi-hat. Alright, then I also liked, I want to grab this open hi-hat at the end here. I'm going to quickly go ahead and set a mute group for hi-hats so that this hi-hat cuts this one off. Now that I have my kick, my snare, a hat, and an open hat, I'm going to chop up some more of the break just to have some variation on my kicks and snares and possibly my hat. I like that one, so let's do this. Okay, so I got another kick here, and then I chopped another snare. Let's go ahead and put another hi-hat in. This looks like a hi-hat. Yes. Now I have all my samples chopped and selected. From here, what I want to do is flatten these pads. Now what flatten pad is kind of like a resample function And the old school way would be to go into the sampler and to change your input to resample the MPC. So whatever comes out of it, excuse me. So whatever comes out of the MPC Live records itself back in the MPC Live. So the flatten pad is a much quicker way of doing that, where you won't have to rename your sample. Well, actually, it gives you an option to name your sample, but you don't have to reprogram it, as in go into your drum program and then scroll through all the samples and put them back. So the flatten the pad will actually resample your pad, whatever's on there, and then drop it on there. So what I'm going to do is click right here and then hit flatten pad. Right now I'm on pad 801 as the title of the break. I'm going to change this to kick. Let's do kick 1. Do it. So it sounds like I have the same thing there. But if I go into program and I look at this now, it's just the single one shot rather than the whole break loop there. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with all of these. So I have all of these flattened now. They're individual samples from the original drum break. They're now one shots. And I want to do a little bit more editing just to be more precise. So I'm going to go into some of these individually and edit them a little bit more. For example, the open hat. It's kind of harsh there at the end. I kind of want to fade that out a bit. Let's see how that sounds. Feel like that's a little better. I could change the start point of these, but I'm going to leave them as is. I think they sound good. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is take advantage of layers. I'm going to use layers, and I'm going to move this snare onto this pad and have both of these snares on the same pad and have them cycle through. And I'm going to do the same thing with the hi-hat. So when I press this hat, it's going to sound like this. And then this will cycle through like... So we get a little bit of variation and more of a natural sound going. So to do that, I'm gonna, first of all, I'm not gonna want this snare here. I'm just gonna take it off. And this hat, I'm gonna remove it from this pad as well. And I'm gonna click on layer 2. And I'm gonna scroll over to my snare drum 2. I'm gonna do the same thing for the hat. And put hat 2. Right now it's set to, my layer is set to, you can't see it really too well, velocity. So layers are functioning as layers at the moment, but if I click cycle, these will now cycle through. It's subtle, but it makes a difference. Now I'm going to leave this kick right here just so I have some more flexibility with it. I don't want them just to cycle through, because then it'll just be like this. But I like this as the kind of like, this works well as like a ghost note. So it's not, that doesn't sound as natural as that does. One other thing I might want to do with these is I'm going to go into my effects and just apply like a filter on my hi-hats, because there's a lot of low frequency information coming from that record. And I'll just do that on my hi-hats and probably my snare. And with my snare, I likely won't filter out as much. My cutoff will be a lot lower. But just to get rid of some of that low end. Just another subtle tool that'll make your mix sound a little bit better. And you, of course, could use your filters within your drum program as well. Put a filter on my kick, on my kicks here. Not so much. All right. Sounds a little bit choppier the slower you play these drum chops. I guess a couple options from here might be to edit your samples further, so that air at the end, maybe do another fade, maybe do some fades on the ends of those, or possibly adding reverb to add a little extra air, so when you are playing these chops a little at a slower tempo, there's a little bit more air in between the samples.